First bill that we have today on the agenda to consider is House File 5, Representative Jim Joy. You can go to the testifier table, prepare to introduce your bill. Thank you for being here, everybody. So Representative Joy, welcome to your first hearing in the Transportation Committee. I appreciate the treats and snacks that you brought.
You know, can
Not
everybody hear me?
today. We'll make a note for that later.
That was on my mind, Chair Kosnick, is the treats for your first bill.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please introduce your bill, and the motion will be to refer it to the Tax Committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair Kosnick. This bill is making Minnesota affordable. And by doing that is, you know, there's a few steps to this bill. One of the main ones is doing what everybody did in Minnesota is we campaigned 2 years ago promising full elimination of Social Security tax. That was not done. The Democrats did not do that. This bill will do that and move that across the line, hopefully. The other part of this bill will move forward is right now we have gas tax that has been moved through and an automatic inflator. That's just automatically. Our job as legislators is to decide what tax increases need to be put in place and what tax decreases need to be put in place, not have an automatic. It will remove that. The delivery fees is another thing that is affecting everybody in their homes, everybody's budget with what it's doing. You know, the 50-cent delivery fee, when you talk about a propane driver driving around handwriting a ticket, and he has 6 stops before he gets back to the office and he handwrites his slips, that's affecting their work, what they gotta do. Removing the delivery fee. And then the last one is looking at the taxes on vehicles when you go renew your license or get licensed and comparing it to what we are with our surrounding states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and looking at a report to see where we stand. We're high on that. With what the Democrats have done this last year with a $10 billion tax increase, it's hurting Minnesota. Minnesota is not on a growth chart. We might have counties that say they're on a growth chart, but Minnesota is not. I'm seeing it in my district up by North Dakota, people leaving. This bill will take us back to getting people hopefully come back to Minnesota, want to stay in Minnesota. Thank you, Chair. I move this.
Just to clarify for the record, Representative Joy did make the motion that House File 5 be referred to the Tax Committee. Thank you for explaining your bill. We have with us, of course, our nonpartisan House fiscal staff analyst, Mr. Lee. If you could just give us a little overview on the fiscal parts. There's a few moving parts in the bill, just for the members and the public to understand.
Certainly, Mr. Chair and members. In your packets, you should see 2 spreadsheet items. The first is from the Department of Revenue. This is a confidential request for MB019. This is from the Department of Revenue, and it shows the estimates for the fiscal impact of the various components of this bill. So on the first few lines, you see the general fund impact. So you can see the full Social Security subtraction. And then you can see payments to counties with casinos and tribal tax agreements. Those last two items are tax interactions that result to the cap of the motor fuels tax indexing. So because that index doesn't increase, the state won't have to make those statutory payments. So those 2 numbers under the Social Security subtraction are slight savings to the general fund. Then beneath the general fund items, you can see the effect on the highway user tax distribution fund. You can see the motor fuels excise tax change. The qualifying service station credit is another tax interaction relating to the capping of the motor fuels tax indexing. And then the motor vehicle rental tax, rather than being pointed towards the highway user tax distribution fund, it is instead moved to the transportation advancement account. Finally, you can see the transportation advancement account under that, where you can see the elimination of the retail delivery fee and moving that motor vehicle rental tax to make up some of the decline in revenue to the transportation advancement account. And then beneath that in the Department of Revenue note, you see the change to within the metropolitan county, 7-county 0.17 or 0.75 sales tax. So more money moving from the Metropolitan Council for Transit into 7 metropolitan counties for various uses. Also in your packet is a spreadsheet from the MN House Fiscal Analysis Office. This shows some of the same information, but in detail with transportation formulas kept in mind. So the first few lines are the general fund impact, as mentioned before with the Department of Revenue note. And then lines 15 through 26 is the current allocation, the current line allocation of the transportation advancement account with the delivery fee and the sales tax on auto parts. And then the proposed change in House File 5 is on lines 63 to 77. So you can see the delivery fee blinking off on line 66. I should note that in fiscal year 2026, you see 4.588 million. That is because there's a 1 month lag time from the delivery fee switching off to the receipts coming in from June. And then you see the sales tax on auto parts is unchanged and the rental tax. Then you can see the formulas for the recipients of the transportation advancement account are different. And then on the next few lines, lines 11 through 113 is the impact on the highway user tax distribution fund. And then the net change to the various transportation funds are on lines 124 through 128. So you can see the trunk highway fund, the county state highways fund, the municipal state streets fund, townships, and this is the net of both township road and bridge, and turnbacks. Then on the back page, you can see the math relating to the change in allocation between the metropolitan counties and the Metropolitan Council, whereas the current allocation you can see on line 134 and 135, 83% Metropolitan Council and 70% Metro counties, and the proposed allocation is 74% Metropolitan Council and 26% Metropolitan counties. And that, Mr. Chair, is a quick walkthrough of the finance pieces, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Don't see any particular questions at this point. We do have some testifiers that have indicated they would like to testify on the file with some of the stakeholders. We have Steve Barthel, Dave Wagner, Ann Finn, Cap O'Rourke, Mike Lee, Steve Finsky, Bruce Neisted, and John Phelan, and we'll go in that order. So at the testifier table, please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Steve Bartle. I'm Director of Government Relations with the Minnesota Grocers Association. The Minnesota Grocers Association has been representing Minnesota's food industry for over 125 years. We're the only trade association in the state that represents the entire food industry from farm to fork. Our association represents over 300 member companies totaling more than 1,300 locations in the state. I'm here to express our strong support for the provisions in House File 5 that would repeal the highest consumer delivery fee in the nation. As we testified when this new fee on consumers was first proposed in 2023, there are significant challenges and costs that businesses face when required to implement and remit this fee. For starters, the cost of updating point-of-sale systems to track and calculate the delivery fee can run into the thousands of dollars per location. The complexities of sales taxes are already difficult enough, but the introduction of the retail delivery fee has added another layer of intricacy. Products that are subject to the delivery fee do not align with established sales tax categories. So now point-of-sale systems must include separate classifications to account for taxable versus non-taxable items, as well as products that are subject to the delivery fee versus those that are not subject to the fee. Many common and essential items in local grocery stores are subject to the delivery fee. These include prepared foods, taxable food products, paper goods, medicines, hygiene products, clothing, cookware, and other vital necessities. The cost of updating point-of-sale systems in combination with the number of hours it takes for staff to track and administer the fee costs businesses thousands of dollars a year. These added costs impact an operator's bottom line and ultimately are reflected in the prices of goods on the store shelves. So even if you aren't one of the 1 in 5 consumers who utilize grocery delivery on a weekly basis, you are still paying the price for the additional administrative cost that this fee places on every grocer in the state who offers delivery services. It is also important to note that the costs imposed by government policies are not experienced equally by all businesses. The financial burden of those increased costs fall much harder on small, family-owned retailers than they do on large corporations. Small businesses simply do not have the profit margin or the sales volume to absorb this 50-cent fee and are forced to pass those costs directly onto their customers. A major retailer like Walmart might be able to absorb this fee and disperse the costs across its vast international network of other stores, but a small retailer lacks that option. In an economy that has seen continued consolidation and market share taken by mega retailers, these new costs and mandates continue to disadvantage small businesses who are being squeezed to the point of closing their doors. This regressive fee also has a disproportionate impact on lower income and disabled consumers who often rely on delivery services for their essential needs. Every one of the projected $55 million collected annually by the delivery fee comes directly out of the pockets of Minnesota consumers who are already facing an increased cost of living. We thank the committee for considering House File 5, and we hope that this legislation will help create a more competitive environment for Minnesota small businesses while making life more affordable and accessible for all consumers. Thank you for your time, and I will be around for any questions.
Thank you. I do have one question, Mr. Barthel. Just approximately for a local, even a big grocery store, approximately how much does it cost to get set up to add a delivery fee mechanism if they need to?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It varies depending on the size of the retailer, the number of checkouts they have. But if you are looking at a kind of a custom system that you're going to need to build to track these different categories, you're looking into the thousands of dollars per location.
Thank you. Any other members? Vice Chair Myers?
Thank you, Chair. Question probably more for fiscal staff. I'm just wondering, from what you've seen since this has been implemented, what the number has been and what projections were previously? And then if you could maybe give a little bit more context of, you know, who's paying for this and who's not paying for it on the delivery fee specifically.
Mr. Lee, are you prepared to provide some insight on who pays the delivery fee and when it's exempt, when it's not? And what was the other part of your question? Oh, what the projections were and if we're meeting projections?
Mr. Chair and Representative Myers, I can give you a comparison of the projection versus the current forecast. So when the delivery fee was enacted in the 2023 transportation bill, the estimate for fiscal year 2025 was that the delivery fee would bring in $59 million, and the current estimate is that it will bring in $35 million. In fiscal 26, the estimate was that the delivery fee would generate $64.8 million, and the current estimate is $45 million. And in fiscal 2027, the estimate was that the delivery fee would generate $65.3 million, and the current estimate is $55 million. So the current estimates are lower than what was forecasted previously. As to who's paying it, I'm afraid I would not be the right person on that.
Mr. Burris, yeah. Maybe that part of the question is more directed to Mr. Burris on what are the exemptions for the delivery fee? When's it applicable and when is it not?
Mr. Chair and members, Representative Myers, so the delivery fee is imposed on the seller, and the structure of the imposition is largely parallel to the state general sales tax, but there are some exemptions as well as additions on what tangible products the fee is imposed on when there is a retail sale and a delivery. So that's kind of the triggering mechanism. So there's kind of a number of things. Largely, it's tangible personal goods. There's some additions around the in the area of prepared food and some baby products are actually part of the exemptions. One of the key exemptions is around a $100 threshold on transactions. So when the transaction itself is below that threshold, the delivery fee doesn't apply. There are also exemptions on sales from bars and restaurants and some nonprofit organization purchases, as well as purchases for that are involve some smaller businesses. And then the kind of the main addition is around some retail purchases of clothing, although there are exceptions in that around diapers. So there's some details on the specifics of the products, but that's kind of the general intro to the range for the fee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burris. Any other member questions? So let's have, go through the next testifier, and then we'll go through. Dave Wagner, Executive Director, Minnesota Propane Association.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Kosnick and members. I'm Dave Wager. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Propane Association. Thank you for allowing me to testify today in House File 5. The Minnesota Propane Association supports the provisions of House File 5 and the repeal of the delivery fee. In preparing for this testimony, I asked several of our members to provide me with some data on the fee in order to give you an idea of the impact this bill has had on our industry in the last 6 months. For today's testimony, I have data from 3 companies delivering propane and refined fuels. One is in northern Minnesota, one is in central Minnesota, and one is in southern Minnesota. The 3 combined companies made 48,417 deliveries and collected 2,336 retail delivery fees. That's only 4.8% of the deliveries they made. The total submitted to the state was $1,168. The financial impact is real to our members. All of our members had to update their delivery software to account for the fee and in order to print the notice on the delivery ticket, which is another requirement. One company reported $2,500 in spending on trackable fees, or trackable labor for the fee. This does not include other administrative expenses that they can't accurately track and apply to the expense of this fee. So this expense to our members is exceeding the amount of revenue that they're sending to the state. As was mentioned, there's exemptions, and most propane deliveries are exempt from the fee. Only propane that exceeds the $100 threshold and requires sales tax collection is actually subject to the fee. The sales tax is primarily a business expense compared to home heat and agriculture, which is tax exempt. So in addition to collecting sales tax in these businesses, now they must also collect a retail delivery fee, which is ultimately paid for by those same businesses. A typical propane delivery truck travels down different roads to different customer types. Any particular road is going to result in a mix of deliveries, from home use to agriculture use to business use. Yet only the business is paying this fee while the truck uses the road for all other deliveries. In our situation, there is no other option than to have our product delivered. These deliveries are to businesses that pay taxes in Minnesota, employ people in Minnesota, primarily invest locally in Minnesota, and support the communities in Minnesota where they work and live. Exemptions were made for specific industries, including utilities. Propane provides the same benefits as utilities as the energy businesses need to operate in Minnesota. While we support this repeal, at the very least, we would like an exemption like that for utilities. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Wager. I'd be interested in if you could provide the committee a copy of your testimony with those figures that you had on there.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple questions from the committee. We have Representative Scraba, you had a question for this testifier or no? Okay, but then maybe we'll wait until the end then with that question. Representative Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wager, can you repeat those? You said that there was 2,000 deliveries out of 48,000 deliveries that were taxable. And then you said something about how they paid $1,000 to the state of Minnesota, but the cost of what? Can you repeat that real quick?
Okay, so in the first 6 months, these 3 companies that provided the data made 48,417 deliveries. And of those deliveries, they assessed 2,336 delivery fees for a total of $1,168. And then there's the expense where they all had to update their software, and that price does vary depending on their software provider and how they're operating their businesses. But one company reported $2,500 in trackable labor for implementing this fee. And that's just labor they could directly attach to the fee. They have other administrative expenses that they can't, account for, so they're just being honest in their reporting.
Thank you, Representative Olson. Thank you, Mr. Wager. It appears that administering the delivery tax is an expensive tax to administer and distribute. Next, we have Ms. Ann Finn from the League of Minnesota Cities, please. Welcome to the committee for 2025. I'm sure you'll be with us quite a bit. Please introduce yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Ann Finn. I represent the League of Minnesota Cities. We are a statewide association representing 841 of Minnesota's 855 cities. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today and also offer that if you want anyone from my team to stop by your offices and talk about transportation or any other issues, that we are very available to do that. The League was a strong supporter of the creation of the Transportation Advancement Account and the revenue sources that the 2023 legislation identified to fund the account. You'll recall these sources include the retail delivery fee, which you've been talking about, as well as the phasing in of the sales tax on motor vehicle parts. For cities, the Transportation Advancement Account provides funds for a system of roads that previously were not on any state funding formula and were funded solely with property taxes and special assessments, which are both pretty unpopular. This system includes all city streets within cities with populations below 5,000, and that is approximately 700 of our 855 cities. And many of those communities are in the districts that are represented on this committee. There are also a system of roads that are not funded within municipal state aid cities. Those are the cities over 5,000 population, cities that are not on the state aid system, and that makes up at least 80% of the streets in those cities. Again, we'd be happy to spend time with any members of this committee or in this committee describing the municipal street system and the shortcomings of existing funding sources. Additionally, the League has a longstanding position of support for indexing of the gas tax to account for inflationary pressures, contributing to the costs of construction, maintenance, and reconstruction projects. We oppose repealing indexing that was enacted less than 2 years ago. In short, we're concerned that this legislation prematurely modifies the TAA and other 2023 transportation funding measures. We respectfully request that you give the 2023 legislation more time to see how those revenues stream in, and that you consider changes after the funding streams stabilize. We would appreciate the opportunity to work with Representative Joy, and I've already reached out to him earlier today, and other stakeholders before this legislation advances. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Finn. Mr. Marble will keep track of committee questions, so just get his attention. Representative Anderson, do you have a question?
I do.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I have a question of the testifier. The League, and I understand you're the recipient of the taxes off of these things, so in the transportation funding account, is the main concern the stream of revenue or where it comes from, the source, how it's done?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Representative Anderson, it's both. I think the main concern that we hear from our cities is that we want the funding source to be reliable so that they know that it's coming from year to year. You might remember the Small Cities Assistance Account, which part of the TAA funds go to. That has been funded in fits and starts over the years. Sometimes they get money, sometimes they don't. And that's created a lot of angst at the local level in terms of trying to budget for the use of transportation funds. They'd love to be able to count on some funding every year and an amount that is as predictable as possible. So I didn't exactly answer your question, but I don't think we're totally wed to one source of funding. We just want it to be a stable source and an ongoing source.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Any other committee questions? We'll proceed to the next testifier, Mr. O'Rourke, Cap O'Rourke with Minnesota Small Cities. And as he's coming to the testifier table, Representative Joy, I have a question. With your bill, there are different levels of funding for, as was mentioned by the League of Minnesota Cities. Are they kept whole, the small cities and the town roads? What's your intent with the different shifting and reallocating of
Yes,
funds?
Mr. Chair, they are kept whole, yes. And, you know, as we move along here with this legislation, we don't want harm. We want to make sure we do it right, so yes.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Mr. O'Rourke, please introduce yourself to the members and the public, and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Cap O'Rourke. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of Small Cities. We advocate on behalf of the over 700 cities that have populations under 5,000. We are here, I want to express my gratitude for Representative Joy. We have worked together for a long time. A little bit of history, as Ann Finn had mentioned. Prior to 2023, Minnesota Small Cities were the only local government entity that got no dedicated funding for transportation costs. Every other unit of government, including townships, got some level of dedicated funding. We did get between 2010 and 2020, we got sporadic one-time funding, but our small cities could not plan on it. When it arrived, basically, it was like a bonus little LGA check, and it wasn't a lot, and so they spent it on largely road patching or to offset existing transportation costs. What we had been asking for was ongoing dedicated revenue that would grow, have some sort of growth factor, and in 2023, it appeared as if we were going to get that. What we were told in 2023 was that we were going to get a total for the next biennium of around $23 million. We were going to get $3 million in the first year, and we were going to get 18 approximately in the second year. However, Department of Transportation, in their reading of statute and the way that the funds were to be delivered, we actually got 0 in the first year and we were supposed to get 3 in the second year. There was a one-time appropriation approved last year for $11 million. That would have brought our biennial total up to about $14 million. So what we really have been seeking for is ongoing revenue that we can count on. And with this new, with the retail delivery fee, we are now seeing another revenue that is falling short of our expectations. We were expecting to get $18 million this year, and it looks like we're going to get under $14 million. So in the 3 years that this bill has been passed, Minnesota Small Cities has been shorted or below expectations, somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 million. So we are excited to have a revenue stream that I think was more stable and that we can count on. But to Representative Anderson's question earlier, we are neutral as to the exact revenue stream. We just want something that our cities can plan on and get in a reliable way. We get these funds different than any other entity. We get our funds paid twice a year in July and December, and there's a delay on that due to Department of Transportation. So we have to wait, and it gets split. Every other entity gets their payment in kind of one lump sum. So we hope that something along these lines that will give us the revenue that we can count on, that our cities can plan on, can move forward.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke, for your testimony, and certainly a lot of things that we will continue to take into consideration as this bill and others, and we develop a bill towards the end of session to try to address those for you and the many Minnesotans that live in our small cities. Any member questions? I don't think. We'll proceed to Mr. Mike Lund with Metro Cities, please.
Mr. Chair and members, Representative Joy, thanks for having me today, and good afternoon. For the record, my name is Mike Lund with Metro Cities. We represent the collective interest of cities in the 7-county metropolitan region. I'm hoping just to underscore a few points here. You've heard from my colleagues, Ms. Finn and Mr. O'Rourke. I won't explain small cities assistance account, although I will mention that there are over 50 small cities in the 7-county region. That's often forgotten about. I think several of them are in Representative Meyer's district. And just in general, as has been mentioned, our cities, large and small, are looking for stable, reliable, predictable funding sources for their transportation needs. In the metro area, local transportation spending outweighs state and federal spending on our transportation system. The bulk of it, as has been mentioned, comes from property taxes. I believe in the metro, it's 47% of transportation spending, including those federal and state sources, comes from the local taxpayers. And it's just not keeping up with the needs that we see on our local systems. We support the Transportation Advancement Account. We support what it sounds like the goals of this bill are to keep those large and small cities accounts funded and to build on successes of past legislative sessions. And we really appreciate that. And I'll just wrap up by saying Metro City stands ready to be a part of the conversation moving forward for our cities as you continue this session. Thanks a lot. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. I appreciate your testimony and being here with the committee and continue to work with the committee in terms of what the needs are of metro cities. The next testifier is Mr. Fensky from the Minnesota Townships.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Fensky with the Minnesota Association of Townships. I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee for hearing the bill, and Representative Joy for offering the bill, but also the conversations that you've had with us on this topic. I think, as many of you know, townships continue to seek more funding for their roads. Our members largely have felt left out over a lot of the past year's funding changes, and we appreciate this bill, that townships are reflected in it and that effectively held harmless in it, and appreciate that. By way of background, townships spend about $230 million per year on their township roads. That's 55,000 miles of road. It works out to about 4,200 a mile per year. It's not a lot when you consider all the things that have to be done with a road. They're doing that largely with property tax revenues, because they get only about 41 million from state gas tax, and they don't have other sources of funding. There's no local sales tax or anything like that. So the importance of state funding is really paramount to townships. We are not very concerned about the source of that. Just looking for something that is consistent, not just one-time funding that townships can come to rely on and hopefully provide some property tax relief for the locals in that area. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. And, you know, it is important to highlight the point that the funding that this committee can do for our local cities and partners, townships, does help lessen the burden on property taxes. So I appreciate that point. Next up, we have Mr. Bruce Neisted with the Minnesota Retailers Association.
Chair Kosnick and members of the committee, my name is Bruce Neisted with the Minnesota Retailers Association. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on House File 5, specifically repealing the delivery fee. We thank Representative Joy for taking a look at this. We know he has a special perspective as a retailer himself relative to this issue, and we just really appreciate the opportunity to testify today. We really do understand the intent behind the delivery fee. In fact, I'll be the first one to say that we support good roads and good infrastructure for our consumers, for our workers, for our retailers. That is extremely important. We just feel the delivery fee has become sort of an unstable and unorthodox way of providing that funding that is really needed. It really is wrong for Minnesota, and it disproportionately impacts, as you heard earlier, those who depend on delivery for necessities and for the goods and services that they actually need. That's our seniors, that's our physically challenged, that's those with health conditions, and others with limited resources or limited access to essential goods. We know this was an attempt, there was an attempt to address sort of the disparities in the bill with the $100 threshold, but I think as you heard from Mr. Burris, it's a little complicated relative to how that applies. And you heard from Mr. Bartle how it applies to the different categories is complicated as well. As a result, this fee is disproportionately hitting those who can afford it the least. And frankly, during the pandemic, our retailers got pretty good at figuring out how to get products to customers. And one of those ways that we train customers to really appreciate is timely, safe, and effective delivery. And now customers here in Minnesota expect that. But today we're paying more for our products because of the delivery fee and the costs and burdens it puts on businesses, including, as you heard, kind of compliance, the fee collection itself, reporting, training, remitting, and audit, all those pieces that are fairly complicated in a fairly complicated bill. Small businesses, as you heard in particular, are faced with really disproportionate costs, and really all retailers, at the end of the day, rarely actually have that 50 cents that they collected. And I'm not here to bash swipe card fees today, but let's think about this. You collect the 50 cents from a consumer, it's processed on a merchant processing card. You actually have about 3% less of that at the end of the day. So you actually don't even have a full 50 cents at the end of the day to remit to the state, but yet you are still responsible for that. Furthermore, as you heard, the treatment of this tax doesn't align with the rest of our sales taxes. So, Mr. Chair, as you asked Mr. Bartle, it causes some real complexities relative to the calculation. In fact, so much so that a lot of my small retailers do that calculation by hand, because it's too costly to implement a system that would do that automatically. Gauge the threshold, decide if an item's included, not included, and all those particularities. So because of that lack of alignment, it's even more complicated here in Minnesota. One thing that's really complicated for consumers too is we're required today to put on a receipt, road improvement and food delivery fee, when actually food delivery is exempted from this tax. So it's even more confusing for consumers when they see that noted on the receipt from a retailer. I'll end with just saying, I think we were told that this is an innovative approach to the future of transportation funding, that other states would hop on it as well, but to date, Minnesota and Colorado are the only two states that have it. Colorado's fee is significantly less than ours, a little more than half of ours, and they continue to tweak their model because it's fairly unpopular in Colorado, very unpopular among small businesses, very unpopular among consumers, and we're starting to feel that same effect here in Minnesota. Mr. Chair, I'll just end with, you asked Mr. Bartle about costs, and I thought he explained that very well. Costs of administering this for a small business are really going to vary based on the size of the business, the systems they have in place. But one thing I'll leave you with, I have a lot of members on my small business side that can't actually afford to make that initial investment. So they're making an after-the-fact calculation as best they can to decide how many consumers should have paid that fee. They aren't collecting that fee. At the end of the day, they're taking that out of their bottom line and the money that they could use to pay their workers and invest in their stores, et cetera. And that's sort of the hidden fee behind this, Mr. Chair. So take some of your swipe card fees. I just ran the numbers at the back of a napkin. If we're collecting about $40 million, we're spending about $1 million in swipe card fees. And then take the fact that we might not have that money at the end of the day. We're actually collecting less than we're actually remitting at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Newstead. Do we have any questions? Otherwise, our last testifier on the list is Mr. Phelan from the Center of American Experiment. Welcome to the committee. Look forward to your testimony, and please introduce yourself and then proceed with your testimony.
Dear members of the House Transportation, Finance and Policy Committee, my name is John Phelan. I'm an economist at Center of the American Experiment. We're a public policy institution based here in Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on HF5, which would, among other measures, repeal the retail delivery fee. In 2023, Minnesota became the latest state, or actually only the second state, to impose a fee on deliveries from such as Amazon Delivery, Uber Eats, and DoorDash, specifically the 50-cent fee on orders totaling more than $100. Nobody denies that state and local governments face problems funding the building and maintenance of roads, but these delivery fees are an inefficient and ineffective way to close budget gaps, and lawmakers should consider other, better policy options. Talk about the problem a little bit. State and local governments are tasked with building and maintaining roads. They generally do so using revenue from three sources: a motor fuels tax, a tax on vehicle registration, and a motor vehicle sales tax. The motor fuels tax, the gas tax, is the largest source of funds, accounting for 35.1% of state and federal highway funding in Minnesota in 2020. But this source of funding has been squeezed in recent years by three factors. The first factor is inflation. Until January 1st this year, Minnesota imposed a gas tax of 28.5 cents a gallon, which, according to the Tax Foundation, was the 31st highest rate in the United States. It was a rare tax which was not relatively high in Minnesota. But inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. Minnesota's gas tax went from 28 cents a gallon to 28.5 cents a gallon in July 2012. Thanks to inflation, what 28.5 cents could buy in July 2012 would have cost 39 cents in May 2024. Gas tax revenues didn't go as far as they did. The gas tax is now up to 31.8 cents a gallon. The second factor is improved fuel economy. The Department of Energy writes in 1975, the sedan wagon class had the highest average fuel economy of all new light-duty vehicles produced at 13.5 miles per gallon. By 2021, the average fuel economy for the sedan wagon class had risen to 31.7 miles per gallon. Beginning around 2000, fuel economies began to rise again. While all vehicle classes have experienced impressive gains in fuel economy over the past 2 decades, the car SUV class has seen a 70% improvement since 2000. But if we are imposing a tax on each gallon of gas sold to cover the construction and maintenance of roads, this improved fuel efficiency means that you will be imposing more wear and tear on the roads for each 31.8 cents you pay. In 2012, for example, the Department of Energy's data show that a car SUV traveled an average of 23.3 miles for each gallon of gas and each 28.5 cents of gas tax paid. By 2021, this had risen to 30.5 miles travel for each gallon of gas and for each 28.5 cents of gas tax paid. The miles traveled and the wear and tear imposed on the roads increased by 31%, but the amount of gas tax revenue generated remained flat. The third factor is electric vehicles. According to the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the number of electric vehicles registered in Minnesota increased by 1,440% between 2016 and 2022, from 749 to 11,534. The state government wants to increase this further so that 5% of light-duty vehicles registered in Minnesota will be EVs by 2025 and 65% by 2040. This presents 2 problems. First, these vehicles impose wear and tear on roads and bridges but do not pay the gas tax to cover it. Indeed, EV owners pay an annual $75 fee in lieu of the state gas tax. This isn't nearly enough. The Federal Highway Administration reports that Minnesotans drive an average 11,361 miles per vehicle annually, with an average miles per gallon of 16.68. Working out average gallons of gasoline purchased, we can calculate that the average Minnesotan motorist pays $194 in gas tax annually, more than double what an EV driver pays in lieu. Second, while contributing less than their fair share to the maintenance of the roads, electric vehicles actually impose more wear and tear than conventional vehicles. The State Smart Transportation Initiative notes that while cars generally have gotten bigger and heavier, EVs exacerbate this problem due to the massive batteries they require. For example, an electric Ford F-150 Lightning weighs at least 1,000 pounds more than the standard F-150, one of the most popular vehicles in the country. This added weight and impact energy will also take a toll on the country's roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. A long-standing rule of thumb called the fourth power law suggests even a modest increase in weight results in at least twice as much road damage. A 50% increase yields 5 times more damage. This extra wear and tear from vehicles which are not paying their fair share towards roads and bridge maintenance is a source of pressure on budgets which will only grow if EVs become as prevalent as government wants them to. So this brings me to the sales tax, to the delivery fee. Transportation funding problems are then very real, but Minnesota's delivery fee is a misconceived way to remedy them. First, our state's delivery fee contains a number of exemptions, which makes the tax complicated and difficult to comply with. Food, including from restaurants, medical supplies, and baby products are exempt. So too are deliveries from retailers with less than $1 million in retail sales during the previous calendar year, and so too are transactions not subject to sales and use tax, except for clothing. Second, like all costs, at least some part of the retail delivery fee will be passed along to the consumer, depending on the relative supply and demand elasticities for the service. These fees disproportionately impact the elderly, mobility-challenged individuals, and the less affluent. For example, approximately 14% of the customer base of food delivery services is over 60 years of age, and surveys have shown that 52% of the population making less than $10,000 annually use such services. Third, these fees put local retailers at a price disadvantage to non-local competitors that do not use last-mile delivery services. While exemptions do allow for small mom-and-pop stores to not be hit by these fees, larger local companies, especially sellers marginally above the limits, would be affected. As profits among delivery companies are already razor-thin or even cross-subsidized among certain entities, it is reasonable to expect that delivery charges would increase by the full amount of the tax. As this fee is inevitably passed on to the consumer, it is likely that the demand for locally delivered items would decrease at the margins, making the playing field even less even for retailers. Fourth, delivery companies that use gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles would be responsible for paying the delivery fee in addition to the state's gas tax. This, in effect, is double taxation of the same use of the transportation infrastructure. This favors those companies that use electric vehicles, compounding the problems of transportation finance I've already discussed. For these reasons, the retail delivery fee should not be a part of the solution to a very real problem. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony, Mr. Phelan. That's the last public testimony on our list. If there's anybody here in the public that didn't make the cutoff, we do have time. If just let us know first. I don't see any. Thank you again. We'll move into member discussion if there's any questions, comments. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to the bill author here, I think this is a wonderful starting point for reducing some of the tax burden that has made this state so unaffordable. I think it does a great job of moving the ball forward and making it a more affordable place to live. One of my concerns, though, not with this bill in particular because it addresses it, but can you shed some light for us on this service station credit? Because one of my concerns is if we continue to allow our gas tax to increase exponentially over the next couple of years, it's going to put us even further away from our competitors. I live 10 miles away from Iowa. Their gas tax is currently lower than Minnesota's. It's not a whole lot lower, but I know where in Iowa I can go to get the cheap gas. And how does that hurt service stations in Minnesota itself? How does it reduce our competitiveness? And how does this service station credit kind of address that issue?
Great question. You know, with, I have a gas
Representative
station
Joy.
that's, sorry, Mr. Chair. I have a gas station that's within 20 minutes from Fargo. So when you talk about the service station credit, and currently there's 15 wholesalers providing fuel to 25 service stations with 7.5 miles of stations in North Dakota that are claiming credit of a 2.5 cents tax. A lot of my consumers are going across that river. It's 30 cents cheaper. You know, so we're trying to make life in Minnesota and driving in Minnesota affordable. That's what this bill does. So everybody's going across that bridge, going to Costco, going to the big grocers, picking up their stuff, and then coming back and using the roads and live in our district. We're bedroom communities across that river. And so this qualifying service station credit will make, this, with the inflator going on, it's going to affect how we're going to be competitive with Iowa, saying South Dakota. You know, Minnesota continue to raising their gas tax, like I say, is taking us out of the pictures. And, you know, when you live in the metro, it's different, but when you live in the bordering cities, it makes a big difference. And we're talking about funding for roads and funding what we need, but people are going to cross that bridge. They're doing it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Joy. A follow-up, Representative Olson.
Yeah, thank you. And this is more just for the organization here. You know, we look at all the things that we're being nickeled and dimed with. We talk about from all the testimony that we heard today. I think it was very clear that the small cities, the league, they don't care where the money comes from. They want to make sure that the money is they know when it's coming, they know an idea of what it's going to be, and it's not a difficult thing to administer. And so what we're seeing over the last year here with this service fee or the delivery fee is that nobody's, when you're in Amazon, when you're opening your cart up and you put more than $100 worth of stuff in it, what you're seeing is it says right there, you have a delivery fee, and then you say to yourself, well, no, I'm going to split this up into 2 different shipments. I'm going to order it 2 times, and then I'm not going to pay that. And we saw it, you know, Mr. O'Rourke was saying that he was counting on, or the small cities were counting on $18 million, and they're getting less than they're getting $4 or $5 million less than that because consumers are smart. They're gonna put their money where their mouth is. They're gonna realize that if I just break my card up, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the only Amazon purchase that I'm gonna pay a 50-cent sales a delivery fee for is something that actually costs over $100 for one item that I can't find anywhere else. And so people are getting smart. This This, although, you could say whatever you want about the formulation or the idea, whether you think it was a great idea to start with or a bad idea to start with, the reality of the fact is that it's not bringing in the money. And the small cities, the league, everyone who's looking for designated road funding needs it somewhere else. So I appreciate that we're moving forward with that. And I really appreciate the fact that we're looking at the motor vehicle registration tax. I just paid my tab fee. And before the other biennium, my vehicles were affordable. And in order to get that little sticker, I had to pay almost $400 for a vehicle that is not a new vehicle. And I think that's a shame. I think that we are, and I told the chair of it 2 years ago, I said, we are conning the state of Minnesota here, especially on new vehicles. Because remember, tax title and licensing fees are never advertised. And so you walk in on day one to buy a new vehicle, and you look at it and they say, oh yeah, there's a deal, it's $49.99. And you say, well, that's okay, I can afford that. And then once you get out of there, it's another $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And then you're paying interest on your taxes, which is something that the state of Minnesota should never play in. We should never force our citizens to pay interest on taxes. That's the wrong answer. So I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. Sorry for taking up so much time. I had to get all that off on my chest there, Chair Kosnick. But this is a wonderful, wonderful way of getting rid of things that never should have happened in the first place.
Representative Joy?
Again, thank you.
I'll let you go back for your close. I didn't know if you had a response to, okay. Representative Scraba, did you still have a question?
No, it's way past. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Representative Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Joy, for bringing this bill. I think it has a lot of good components in it. I was a township supervisor for a while, and I understand the challenges we have in our rural small cities and townships, and we do have to have streams of money that are dedicated to this. Unfortunately, this way of doing it isn't the right way. So for 26 years, I owned a dairy supply business. We called on dairy farms, and we did quite a few deliveries. Under this system, I'd have to come up with $2,000 in fees, but that's just the small part of it. The rest of it is having to make sure that I was within the exceptions that needed to happen. Was I selling the right amount? All of that is calculations. And if you're wrong, then what? And so this isn't the right way to do it. And because we have all these exceptions, we end up picking the winners and losers. And we can't continue to do that either. There's got to be better ways that we can do this besides this delivery fee. The other thing is I just drove out to Bozeman this last weekend. My son purchased a truck that I had, and I brought his Impala back to Minnesota. It'll be a real boondoggle for Minnesota to get 2008 Impalas here, because it's actually a good deal to come back and sell them in Minnesota, because you don't have to pay any of those extra taxes. So those are going at a really high cost. Unfortunately, if you buy something new, you're going to be tagged on it. It's not a good place to buy new vehicles in this state, because of all the registration and added fees that we have. So it's a really good deal if you're selling a 2008 Impala with about 260,000 miles on it. This is the place we brought it back to, because this is the hub for them. So that's why these things are not right. We need to have those revenue streams, but this is not the right way to do it. It penalizes a lot of the people that drive the economy, and we don't need that. So thank you, Representative Joy, for bringing this bill. I think it's the right direction. We have some work to do to make sure we take care of our townships and small cities, but this isn't the right way to do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Vice Chair Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Joy, I just want to say thank you for bringing a bill forward here that's trying to address affordability for individuals and, families in Minnesota. One of the big pieces of this is something that I heard, almost every single day this summer when I was out. And that's something that we heard from our seniors, and grandparents. If Minnesota is going to be a great place to raise a family, that also includes grandparents and seniors. And we've got to do something, and this is putting us, on the right track to work through that. So I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for, prioritizing, seniors, these individuals, and I know you'll keep working with the stakeholders here, and this is going to continue to move in the right direction.
Thank you, Vice Chair Myers. Representative Joy, I served on the tax committee with you. I'm not on that this year, but there's certain principles of tax policy, and we're not in the tax committee, but we are talking about taxes on transportation. And the Tax Foundation has kind of a metrics of good tax policy that should be simplicity, stability, neutrality, and transparency. And I think what we've heard today is the lack of those principles being used in the delivery fee mostly. It's very complicated. It's expensive to administer. It's not really a neutral tax. It's taxing some and not taxing others. It's convoluted. And it's not very transparent when it's charged to the seller and not necessarily to directly at the consumer level either. And on top of that, in my neighborhood, we've got delivery trucks coming and going all day long, and most of them are probably exempt. I live with 2 teenage daughters, and so we have delivery. They shop a lot differently than Dad. I'm still old school. I like to go in there and touch it and feel it and go into the brick and mortar, but somehow Amazon's got our address, and they're coming and going all week long between our house and our neighbors. And that wear and tear that was mentioned on our roads, we're not addressing that particular issue if that's part of what the delivery fee was intended to do. And so do you have some comments on the effectiveness of the delivery tax and if it's meeting its mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is underperforming. One of the things too, when we put these fees in, when we put the gas fees, we put the delivery fee in, when we talk about small retailers, large retailers, we talk about them changing their software up at the till. I'm a retailer myself. It's $15,000 for 2 tills for me to upgrade my software. Then I gotta have administration fees in that. And when you look at a 50-cent delivery fee or an increased our gas tax, just always keep in mind there's 3% credit card fee or 3% credit card fee on that. And so it's just not what's affecting it's how much it's affecting us with everything we have to do. So as we continue in Minnesota pushing fees and thinking that we gotta move the number higher and charge this, it's making us less competitive. It's making life and driving in Minnesota unaffordable. And we want to make it more affordable. That's what we're seeing today. And the retailers aren't just taking this and not passing it on. It's getting passed on. So they have to pass everything on to the consumer, which is making life not easy to live in Minnesota. So I hope we again make life and driving in Minnesota affordable. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Joy. There are no amendments at this time. We'll continue to work on the file. Is there any other final discussion on the bill, members? Hearing none, Representative Joy renews his motion that House File 5 be referred to the Committee on Taxes. Do you want to close, or did you already?
I already did.
You're good? Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion prevails. The bill is referred to the Committee on Taxes.